The night begins in silence, but not the comforting kind. It is the silence of a building that has not been entered in years, the kind that presses in around you until the creak of your own shoes feels like trespassing. The old youth center sits at the edge of town, its once white siding weathered to a dull gray, windows fogged with dust, basketball nets frayed and long collapsed. For nearly 3 decades, it has been nothing more than an empty shell of memory, avoided by the people who walk past it on their way to work or church, avoided even by the children who play nearby. To them it is more ghost than structure, a place heavy with whispers. When the janitor climbs up into the crawl space above the main hall, he expects only the usual: mildew, fallen insulation, maybe a mouse nest tucked into the wiring. He balances on the aluminum ladder, his flashlight cutting across the ceiling tiles one by one. Then, as he shifts his weight, one tile slips slightly out of place. It is subtle, almost nothing, but enough to make him pause. He pushes the light toward it and sees what should not be there. A corner raised where it shouldn't be, as if something has been pressed against it from above. Carefully, he lowers the tile and finds a manila envelope wedged into the narrow space. It is coated in dust, edges warped with moisture, but in bold black ink across the front, there's a year that refuses to fade. 1997. His breath catches in his throat. That date is not just any year in this town. It is the year everything changed. The year 12 children entered this very building for a sleepover and never came out. The year that tore families apart, cementing this center as a wound that never healed. He lowers the envelope with shaking hands, staring at it as if it might burn through his skin. He knows the official story, everyone does. The children were said to have run away together. An implausible but convenient explanation. Authorities closed the case within months. Parents protested, rumors spread, and eventually the community folded under the weight of silence. But in all these years, no physical trace has ever surfaced. Until now. The janitor does not open it. He simply places it on the desk of the building supervisor and walks out of the center without saying a word. Later, when investigators unseal the envelope, the first photographs spill across the table. Faces grainy but recognizable stare back, children huddled in sleeping bags, eyes wide with unease, all captured inside the walls of the very hall where the janitor had been standing. The photographs carry no captions, no notes, just an undeniable presence that contradicts everything in the official record. The narration settles over the scene like fog, reminding the audience of the contradiction. That this building had been searched top to bottom by police, dogs, even federal agents, yet somehow a simple ceiling tile concealed. The first new evidence in 27 years. The question echoes in the air. Heavy and unavoidable, what else was overlooked and why? The envelope marks the beginning of something larger, a story that was supposed to remain buried under layers of bureaucracy, fear and carefully managed silence. But silence has a way of cracking, just like that ceiling tile. And once something comes loose, no one can put it back the way it was. The story of that night has been retold so many times that it feels more like a legend than an event. But every parent who lived through it insists the details remain razor sharp, impossible to dull with time. It was June of 1997, the kind of humid summer evening when the town felt safe enough to let children roam until the streetlights blinked on. The youth center promised something special. An all-night sleepover for kids between 9 and 12, complete with pizza, movies projected on the gym wall, and board games spread out across folding tables. Parents dropped them off at dusk, exchanging waves and small talk, never imagining that it would be the last time they saw their children alive. Inside, the gym buzzed with excitement. The sound of sneakers squeaked against the polished wood floors. Laughter rang out as pillow fights broke loose, and the smell of pepperoni lingered in the air. 12 kids signed in on a clipboard at the front desk, their names handwritten in uneven pencil lines. One of the volunteers collected permission slips and tucked them into a binder. By all appearances, everything was ordinary, even wholesome. A dozen children supervised, safe, and contained within 4 walls that had been built for community and trust. But memory is treacherous, and accounts from that night vary. Some parents remember noticing extra cars parked outside the center, engines idling in the dark. One mother swears she saw an unfamiliar man watching from across the street. though her statement never made it into the official reports. Others remember nothing unusual, only the sharp, final image of their children dragging sleeping bags up the steps and looking back with quick, excited smiles. By midnight, the building was locked from the inside as procedure required. Lights dimmed, sleeping bags unrolled across the gym floor. A volunteer set up the movie, an old VHS tape, and the children settled in. Sometime around 2 in the morning, neighbors recalled hearing laughter, faint music, the echo of kids being kids, then silence. No shouts, no cries, no sound of doors opening, just an abrupt stillness that hung over the building until morning. When parents arrived to collect their children at 8 a.m., they were greeted with a scene that would never leave them. The front doors were locked. No one answered when they knocked, then pounded. Police were called, keys produced, doors forced open. The gym was empty. Sleeping bags were left unrolled. Shoes scattered across the floor, a half-finished board game on one table. Pizza boxes still held slices gone cold and greasy. It looked less like children had left than like they had simply vanished mid-motion. The investigation began immediately, though immediately is a word spoken with bitterness by the families. Police insisted there was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks. They argued that the children must have left of their own accord, perhaps sneaking out during the night, but to the parents that explanation never made sense. 12 children cannot vanish at once without a trace. 12 children cannot coordinate a runaway with no backpacks, no notes and no sightings. 12 children cannot all make the same decision at the same time, leaving behind their shoes and toys. Still, the official story hardened quickly. Press conferences framed the disappearances as voluntary, the work of impressionable minds influenced by television or older kids. The building was combed by search teams, but no substantial evidence was recovered. No footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, just the eerie impression of a gathering that had been interrupted by something no one would admit to. For weeks, the town swirled with theories. Some whispered about a cult, others about underground tunnels, rumored to connect beneath the center. There were stories of a bus seen leaving town at dawn, though no driver or passengers were ever identified. Each rumor ignited and died in turn, smothered by the police's steadfast insistence on the runaway narrative. What lingers most for those who lived it is the stillness of that gym. The image burned into their minds, a dozen small sleeping bags forming a circle, pillows dented where heads once rested, as if the children had simply evaporated into the humid air of that June night. The official version of events was presented with confidence, as though speaking it aloud enough times would make it true. Within days of the disappearances, press conferences were held in the town courthouse, and uniformed officers stood behind the sheriff as he explained that there was no evidence of foul play, no signs of forced entry, and therefore the only logical explanation was that the 12 children had run away together. He spoke in measured tones, reassuring the cameras that resources were being mobilized, search teams were being organized, and that families should remain calm. But beneath the calm words was a thinly veiled dismissal. To the parents sitting in those rows of wooden chairs, nothing about the story made sense. Their children had not packed bags. They had not left behind notes. They had not shown any indication of planning such an act, let alone planning it in unison. Mothers and fathers raised their hands, asking how 12 children, ranging in age from 9 to 12, could organize such a mass disappearance without anyone noticing. The sheriff repeated the same phrase, "Children are unpredictable." Newspapers picked up the official line almost immediately. Headlines suggested the group might have been inspired by television shows, books, or stories of adventure. Some outlets painted the children as restless, adventurous souls who longed for escape. Others framed them as troubled, hinting at problems at home that might have driven them away. These narratives wounded the families deeply, painting their grief as if it were their fault. But more than the insult was the gnawing certainty that what they were being told simply wasn't possible. The timeline itself began to crack under scrutiny. Dispatch records showed an officer was logged as responding to the center before the first 911 call had even been placed. A fire inspection record listed the building as checked in early July of 1997, though the center had been closed off entirely after June. Parents pointed out these inconsistencies at community meetings, but officials deflected, saying paperwork was often misfiled, or that clerical errors were to blame. No corrections were ever made. Behind closed doors, some officers admitted they were troubled. A few privately told parents that the runaway story was a dead end, that something more sinister had happened inside that gymnasium. But those whispers never appeared in any official report. The case was marked closed before the end of the year. The files boxed and stored, the youth center locked and left to decay. For the families, the closure felt like betrayal. They had expected search parties that stretched into the woods, cadaver dogs, federal resources. Instead, the effort dwindled within weeks. The message was clear. The town and the state had no appetite for a deeper investigation. Whether from incompetence, fear, or something darker, the authorities seemed determined to bury the truth along with the missing children. The parents organized vigils, pinned photographs of their children to bulletin boards, and stood outside the courthouse holding candles. They begged for help from television stations and national programs, but the coverage was always framed with the same skepticism. Missing or runaways? The captions asked, as if the doubt itself were proof. Slowly, as the years passed, the families were left to sit in their grief alone, with neighbors and strangers alike beginning to look at them not as victims, but as cautionary tales, reminders of something best forgotten. The town adjusted. New families moved in who didn't remember that summer. The youth center was shuttered, left to rot, an ugly reminder on the edge of Main Street. And the official story calcified. 12 children, unhappy or restless, slipped away into the night, never to be seen again. A tragedy but not a crime. At least that's what the paperwork said. But for those who lost their children, the paperwork was a lie. They clung to the details, the locked doors, the abandoned shoes, the uneaten food, as proof that their children had not simply walked out. They whispered about the contradictions, the timelines that didn't fit, the officer who arrived too soon, the inspection after the closure, and when the ceiling tile shifted 27 years later, when the envelope marked 1997 slid into the light, they felt vindicated. At last, something tangible, something real, evidence that the official story was never the truth. The building stands like a monument to denial. Its broad double doors, once painted a cheerful blue, are now sun-faded and scarred, one hanging slightly off its hinge. The parking lot is cracked, grass growing through the asphalt like veins pushing toward the surface. A rusted basketball hoop still leans precariously near the side wall, its net long since frayed into threads. For 27 years, the youth center has been left untouched, frozen in time and memory. To outsiders, it looks like another abandoned building in a shrinking town. To those who know the story, it is a tomb. As the investigators step inside for the first time, the air feels different, thick, stale, a mix of dust, mildew, and something harder to place, the faint chemical tang of old varnish clinging to the gym floor. The echo of footsteps bounces sharply, louder than expected, as if the building itself amplifies sound in the absence of children's voices. Flashlights sweep across walls where posters still hang, their edges curled and yellowed. A faded safety sign reads "Buddy System. Never be alone." The irony is suffocating. In the main hall, the remnants of that final night remain. A box of VHS tapes sits stacked beneath a warped television cart. Folding tables are pushed against the walls, one still holding a dried-out board game with plastic pieces scattered mid-play. The basketball court lines are cracked but visible, and the faint outlines of where sleeping bags once lay can still be discerned by the discoloration of the floorboards. Every detail presses the imagination back into 1997, as if the investigators are intruding on the children's last night. The team notes the locks on the doors. Each shows no sign of tampering. They were locked from the inside, just as police records claimed. Yet several windows along the side hall are painted shut, thick layers of white applied hastily, unevenly sealing them closed. The paint is dated not in 1997, but later, early 2000s, according to a hardware supplier's batch number still visible on the rim. This small anomaly, pointless to most, immediately suggests the space was altered long after the official closure. As the team explores further, the sense of being unwelcome grows. In the staff lounge, A coffee mug still sits on the counter, rim-stained, handle chipped. The calendar on the wall remains frozen on June 1997, with a red circle around the date of the sleepover. The circle was drawn in thick marker, far darker than the faint pencil notes on the other days. It is a chilling reminder that the night was planned, marked, anticipated, and then ended in silence. Deeper into the building, investigators find a maintenance door that appears on no blueprint. The metal is newer than the surrounding structure, its paint less worn, the hinges uncorroded. It leads only to a narrow storage space, but the walls inside are mismatched concrete, as though poured hastily, and not aligned with the original construction. The floor is uneven, and small cracks reveal a different foundation beneath, older, with darker cement. Whoever built this section did so quietly, without permits or inspection. One of the investigators kneels, pressing a hand against the cold concrete. The surface is smooth, except for faint etchings that look accidental at first. Scratches, scrapes, but closer inspection reveals deliberate marks. Letters and numbers carved shallowly, some too worn to make out. Among them, a single word is still clear. Here, no context, no date, just that single word embedded in stone. The discovery of the ceiling tile and the envelope had suggested oversight or neglect. But this, the hidden door, the altered structure, the etched wall feels intentional. It suggests not oversight but concealment. The investigators exchange quiet glances, their breaths fogging slightly despite the summer heat outside. The youth center is not simply a decayed building. It is a constructed silence, a stage built to erase whatever really happened. As they prepare to leave, the light from a flashlight catches something high in the rafters. Above the basketball hoop, faint lines of chalk remain, children's names written during play, some half erased, some still visible. Among them, written in a different, heavier hand, is a 13th name, one that does not match any of the official records. The discovery comes not in the open gym or the obvious rooms, but in a place easily overlooked. One of the investigators, moving through a side hallway lined with lockers, notices that a door at the end doesn't close flush. It's a storage closet, cluttered with broken folding chairs and boxes of outdated sports equipment. Dust lies thick on everything, but near the bottom shelf the dust looks disturbed. Kneeling, the investigator pulls aside a warped cardboard box and sees the corner of a spiral-bound notebook wedged into the shadows. The notebook is swollen with age, the paper edges curled from moisture, but the handwriting inside is unmistakably that of a child. The cover bears no name, only stickers half peeled away, cartoon characters popular in the late 90s, faded to pastel ghosts of their original colors. The first few pages are ordinary, school notes, simple doodles, the kind of observations any child would scribble. Then the entries shift. The handwriting grows shakier, margins filled with nervous scrawl. The child, later identified as one of the 12, writes about excitement for the sleepover, about what movies they'd watch and who they'd sit next to. But the last entries, dated only days before the night, changed tone. One margin note reads, "Don't want to sleep under the lights. It's too loud above." Another says, "We heard them walking when the gym was empty. No one believed us." The deeper investigators go into the notebook, the more disturbing the fragments become. Lines are cut off mid-sentence, as if the child was hurried or interrupted. One page is filled with repetitions of the same phrase. There's a door that isn't on the map. At the bottom of the page, in a different ink, and pressed hard enough to dent the paper, is a single word written 3 times, "Stay." The notebook is passed carefully from hand to hand, gloves protecting its fragile pages. Each entry raises more questions than answers. Why did the child fear the ceiling? What noises could they have heard in a locked building? And the door, was it the same newly constructed space the team had found, or something else entirely? Parents who are shown the artifact later recognize the handwriting instantly. One mother breaks down upon seeing the familiar curve of her son's letters, the little star doodle he always drew when he didn't know what to write. For her, the notebook is proof her child was not a runaway. He was frightened, observant, and trying to document what others dismissed. It is the first tangible trace of a voice silenced by the official story. The team cross-references the child's notes with building blueprints. The door that isn't on the map could refer to multiple anomalies, but the wording suggests familiarity, as though the children had seen it repeatedly, not just once. And the mention of too loud above ties chillingly to the ceiling tile discovery, decades later. The possibility emerges that the children were aware of hidden movements in the building long before the night they disappeared. As the investigators close the notebook, a final unsettling detail emerges. The back cover has been torn almost entirely away, leaving only a jagged edge. Faint impressions of writing remain on the last page, the kind made when someone presses too hard with a pencil. Using angled light, the letters become barely legible. Don't tell them. Don't tell anyone what we saw. The room feels heavier after the find, as if the walls themselves are complicit. This is no longer the absence of evidence. It is the evidence of absence. Voices captured and ignored until now. The notebook is bagged carefully, logged and sealed, but its words echo in every step as the investigators leave the building. For the first time since 1997, a child speaks again, not in person but in ink, breaking through the silence that was forced on the case. The voices of the families fill the gaps left by official silence, and they do not speak lightly. Nearly 3 decades have passed, yet the rawness in their tone makes it sound as if the children disappeared yesterday. Each parent, sibling, or relative carries their memory differently, like scars hidden beneath clothing. Some speak quietly, barely above a whisper, as though afraid that speaking too loud might summon the same fate. Others erupt in waves of anger, their grief sharpened into accusation. Together, their stories form a counter-narrative, far stronger than the official one ever allowed. One mother describes how she still sets a place at the dinner table every June on the anniversary of the night. The chair stays empty, the plate untouched, but she insists it keeps her daughter present. Her voice breaks as she recalls the phone calls that plagued her in the weeks after the disappearance, her landline ringing at odd hours. Always silence on the other end. Police dismissed them as prank calls. She remains convinced it was her child trying to reach her, or someone else ensuring she stayed quiet. A father, now stooped with age, recounts how he drove every back road in the county for months after the night, searching barns, sheds, even culverts. He kept a flashlight in his glove compartment for years, unable to drive past an abandoned structure without looking inside. He talks about the exhaustion of hope, how each false lead drained him until hope itself became a weight he could no longer carry. His words hang in the air like confession. I stopped looking, but I never stopped seeing her face. Siblings of the missing speak with their own burdens. Some were old enough to remember vividly, others too young and left with only the emptiness of growing up in a house where laughter had been replaced with silence. One sister admits she envied her brother for years, envied that his memory froze at age 11, while she had to keep aging, keep living in a world where he did not. Another recalls being told by classmates that her sister just ran away because she didn't like home, a cruelty that lingered in every school hallway. Beyond the pain lies the deep resentment toward the authorities. Families describe being treated like suspects rather than victims, their homes searched, their routines scrutinized. One mother remembers an investigator asking if her son had ever shown signs of being difficult or violent, as if his disappearance might somehow be his fault. They all remember the same thing. The moment the runaway label was stamped onto their children's names, the moment the system closed its ears. Fear spread through the town after that summer. Some neighbors turned cold, avoiding the families as if grief were contagious. Others whispered about curses, about the center being haunted, superstitions that made the families feel even more isolated. Friendships broke, marriages strained, churches divided. Those who spoke too loudly about inconsistencies found themselves shunned, their businesses quietly losing customers, their reputations tainted by a sense of obsession. One widow remembers how her husband, a former staff worker, began noticing cars parked outside their home at night, engines idling without headlights. When he reported it, no one came. Weeks later, he left town and never returned. The families gather now around faded photographs, passing them across kitchen tables like holy relics. School portraits with crooked smiles, birthday snapshots with paper hats, Candid shots of kids with missing teeth and tangled hair. These are the only anchors they have left. Some keep entire rooms untouched. Toys still lined on shelves. Beds still made with the sheets their children loved. Others have boxed everything up, unable to bear the sight. Grief takes different forms, but all roads lead back to the same night in June. What weighs most heavily is the silence that followed. They were told not to push, not to stir panic, not to spread rumors. Some say they received direct warnings. Others describe subtle intimidation. A stranger following them in the grocery store. Letters slipped into mailboxes that simply read, "Let it rest." For years, their grief was forced underground, buried beneath official narratives and community shame. Now, with the discovery of the ceiling tile and the journal, something shifts. For the first time in 27 years, they feel proof on their side. Yet, proof does not erase the ache, nor does it mend the decades lost. What it does is rekindle both hope and fury. Hope that their children left some trace waiting to be found. Fury that the truth was smothered for so long. The families speak into the camera not just to tell their stories, but to demand, "Look again. Do not turn away this time. We cannot lose them twice." The trail of paper is supposed to be the most reliable thing in an investigation. Paper doesn't lie, they say. Dates, signatures, stamps, these are meant to provide order. Proof, accountability. Yet when the files surrounding the 1997 disappearance are pulled from county archives, what emerges is a mess of contradictions so blatant, it feels less like incompetence and more like erasure. The first anomaly is the call log from that June morning. The 911 records show the first emergency call placed at 8:12 a.m., when frantic parents, unable to get into the locked youth center, begged for assistance. But alongside that is a patrol log, showing an officer dispatched to the very same location at 7:58, 14 minutes earlier. How could police have been en route before anyone officially called? Clerical error, the sheriff's office once claimed, but the handwriting on the log looks hurried, darker ink than the surrounding entries, as if added after the fact. Inspection records tell a similar story. A safety inspection report for the center is stamped E, July 15, 1997, nearly a month after the building had been closed off as a crime scene. The inspector's signature is neat, his initials matching other documents, but the date makes no sense. How could an inspection take place in a sealed building with evidence still under review? When asked about it years later, the inspector himself swore he never set foot in the building after June. His name, he said, must have been used by someone else. Permits for renovations only deepen the confusion. Blueprints filed in the county office in late 1998 show modifications to the youth center's foundation, extra supports, additional poured concrete, subtle structural changes. Yet in the official narrative, the building had been shuttered since 1997, with no approved renovations. Who authorized that work? Why were construction crews present in a building tied to an unsolved disappearance? No one will answer, and half the signatures on the paperwork belong to officials who no longer live in the county, some of whom cannot even be located. Even the attendance sheet from the night of the sleepover raises questions. 12 names are listed in pencil, scrawled by children's hands, but one faint set of initials in the margin doesn't correspond to any child. The sheet was supposed to be safeguarded as evidence, yet it has clear eraser marks, as if an extra name was removed. When the sheet is compared to photocopies preserved by a parent, the copies show 2 names that are missing from the official version. The discrepancy is undeniable, verifiable in ink and graphite. Everywhere the investigators turn, the documents betray the official line. Dates are out of order, records contradict themselves, and files that should exist simply vanish. When the team requests police dispatch tapes from that night, they're told the tapes were erased as part of routine maintenance. Yet, a clerk who worked in the office at the time recalls that those tapes were explicitly set aside. She remembers labeling them herself, locking them in a cabinet. Her memory stands against the official account, and once again the paper trail phrase. For the families, each revelation is both vindication and torment. Vindication because they always knew the runaway story was a fabrication. Torment because the lies are written plainly in ink, but still no one has been held responsible. They gather around the copies of documents as investigators lay them side by side, highlighting mismatched dates, circling inconsistencies. The parents' eyes linger on those small details, because small details mean their children did not simply choose to vanish. The silence from officials grows heavier. Calls for comment are deflected. Answers canned, clerical errors, misplaced files, human mistakes. But to the families, these explanations are no longer enough. Errors do not erase names. Errors do not forge signatures. Errors do not pour concrete over spaces that never officially existed. Each piece of paper becomes an artifact of resistance, proof that the story sold to the town was never the truth. That what happened in that youth center was not misadventure, but something carefully hidden. And still, the paper trail does not reveal what the children saw, or why they never returned. It only points to the hands that tried to cover it. Like breadcrumbs scattered through time, the documents show a path. And the path does not lead away from the building, it circles back to it, again and again. The ceiling tile, once pried loose, was only the beginning. Hidden inside the cavity, above the youth center's multi-purpose room, a narrow cardboard box had been wedged between insulation and rafters, its edges yellowed and brittle with age. Inside, wrapped in plastic grocery bags from a long-defunct chain store, lay a stack of Polaroid photographs. The air around them seemed to thicken, as if the room itself understood the weight of what had been found. Investigators handled the box like a sacred object, gloves on, evidence bags at the ready. Yet they know the Polaroids are more than artifacts. They are testimony frozen in chemicals and paper. They contradict official statements. They refute timelines. And they carry the faces of the lost directly into the present. No longer just names in old newspaper clippings. The children look back at the living. Their images demanding answers that words on paper never could. The discovery unsettles more than just the families. When word of the photographs leaks to the community, fear resurfaces. Former staff from the youth center refuse to comment, some shutting their doors to investigators. An anonymous tip arrives claiming that the Polaroids were part of a training file, kept by someone in authority, though no details are given. Whispers spread that the photographs were meant to be found eventually, planted as a cruel breadcrumb to draw people back into the story. The Polaroids, fragile and chemical-smelling, carry an undeniable power. They are intimate and invasive, proof that someone was there watching, recording, proof that the night did not unfold the way the town was told. They sit now under glass, catalogued and numbered, but their impact lingers beyond the archive room. Families begin to dream of their children again, not in abstract memory but in the exact poses frozen on film. Investigators feel eyes on them, even when alone, as if the act of uncovering has placed them in the same position as the children once were, observed, documented, recorded. The box closes, but the images remain, like echoes burned into the mind. For the first time, the missing are no longer invisible. They are staring back. Their presence makes it impossible to accept the silence that followed. The photographs do not answer what happened beneath the youth center's roof, but they make one thing clear. It was witnessed, preserved and hidden deliberately. Someone wanted these moments to exist. Someone wanted to remember what the town was forced to forget. The silence breaks not with a dramatic confession, but with a phone call. Her voice, low and trembling, filters through the static of a blocked number. The caller claims to have worked at the youth center in the summer of 1997, not as a teacher or counselor, but as a part-time custodian hired to clean on weekends. For decades, he has carried something he swore he would never say. The discovery of the Polaroids, however, rattled him enough to reconsider. He agrees to meet, on the condition that his face and name remain concealed. The meeting takes place in a dim cafe on the edge of town, a place where strangers are less likely to notice. He arrives with his hood pulled up, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. When he finally speaks, his words spill out in fits, as if years of silence have rotted his memory into fragments. Still, the fragments are enough to send chills through the investigators. He claims the youth center had rooms that didn't appear on any blueprint, service tunnels, storage chambers, and a locked stairwell that descended below the foundation. He was never told to clean there, but he often saw lights left on in hallways he wasn't supposed to access. On the night of the sleepover, He swears he was called in unexpectedly. A supervisor asked him to stay after hours, just in case the kids made a mess. He remembers arriving around 11 max p.m. and being told to stay in the kitchen until further notice. What struck him was the presence of men he had never seen before. Men in plain clothes, but with the clipped demeanor of authority. They weren't parents. They weren't staff. He remembers one of them carrying a small briefcase, another unlocking the very stairwell door he had been told never to touch. He didn't see the children taken, but he remembers the sound, the shuffle of many small feet on concrete, the muffled hum of voices, then silence. Hours later, when he was allowed to leave, the gym floor was empty. His voice trembles when he describes the aftermath. He claims he was given an envelope with cash, $200, more than his usual monthly pay, and told not to return. The youth center would be closed for repairs, he was told. When news broke that the children had vanished, he assumed others would step forward, but no one did. And when he received an anonymous letter a week later warning him to forget what you heard on the stairs, he convinced himself it was safer to stay quiet. The investigators press him for details, names, descriptions, anything verifiable. He remembers little clearly. One of the men had a limp, another smoked constantly. The briefcase bore a faded sticker from an airline that hadn't operated since the 1980s. The stairwell door had a symbol carved into its paint, a circle intersected by a line, something he thought was graffiti at the time. These details, though small, resonate with the unearthed Polaroids. In one photograph, faint chalk marks on the wall resemble the same circle and line symbol. When asked why he came forward now, he admits the Polaroids unsettled him. He had convinced himself that maybe the children were taken somewhere safe, hidden for reasons beyond his comprehension. But seeing their faces, vulnerable and afraid, convinced him otherwise. They weren't supposed to be remembered, he whispers. Those photos weren't for the families. They were for someone else. His warning is clear. He urges the investigators to stop digging, to leave the past buried. He insists the people involved are still alive, still watching. You don't understand, he says, voice cracking. That building was only the doorway. Before he leaves, he slips a folded piece of paper across the table. Inside is a rough sketch of the youth center floor plan as he remembers it, complete with a stairwell marked in red, an entrance that never appeared on the official blueprints. The investigators leave the cafe shaken, clutching the paper as if it were a holy relic. For the first time, testimony aligns with artifacts. A hidden stairwell, unexplained figures, silence enforced by threat. The story told in courtrooms and news. Broadcasts all those years ago cannot hold against the weight of this account. Someone guided those children down into the dark, and someone made sure the world forgot. The paper in hand, stained with coffee and drawn from memory, is not just a sketch. It is a map leading into the heart of the contradiction. The backlash comes faster than expected. Within days of the witness account leaking among the families, the investigators begin to feel the weight of an official counter-narrative pressing down on them. At first, it's subtle. Emails from county offices go unanswered. Requests for records are temporarily misplaced. Phone calls drop mid-sentence. Then the denials grow sharper, more public. A spokesperson from the sheriff's department steps in front of cameras, repeating the same tired line that has echoed for nearly 3 decades. The children were most likely runaways. The case remains closed due to lack of credible evidence, and any claims to the contrary are speculative and harmful to the families. The families bristle at this, their fury barely contained. To them, the Polaroids are credible evidence. The witness sketch of the hidden stairwell is credible evidence. Yet the institution that failed them in 1997 now dares to gaslight them again, as though nothing new has been uncovered. The spokesperson even goes so far as to suggest that the Polaroids may have been planted, fabricated by outsiders, trying to stir controversy. For the parents, it is another wound layered atop decades of silence. The suggestion that their grief is being exploited, rather than honored. Behind closed doors, the pressure turns personal. Investigators find themselves trailed by unmarked cars late at night, headlights keeping just enough distance to avoid confrontation. One receives a voicemail of nothing but heavy breathing. Another discovers their request for employment, verification, needed for background, research, flagged by county HR as inappropriate and unauthorized, a subtle reminder that their credentials can be undermined at any time. At a town council meeting, a senior official singles them out by name, warning about outsiders, coming in to dredge up pain best left in the past. The implication is clear: stop or be stopped. Still, the evidence does not disappear. When journalists begin sniffing around the story, asking about the photographs, county officials double down. They circulate an internal memo labeling the investigators as conspiracy theorists, lumping them in with fringe groups. The tactic works on some in the community. Neighbors who once offered kind words now avert their eyes. Local businesses suddenly become inhospitable, muttering that those people are stirring trouble. Isolation sets in. For the families, the counter-narrative cuts deep. They are accused of clinging to false hope, of inventing new stories to justify their decades of pain. One grieving mother is even confronted in a grocery store by a former deputy, who sneers that she ought to be ashamed for spreading lies. She breaks down in tears in the aisle, not because she doubts herself, but because the hostility confirms something darker. The system is not just indifferent, it is actively complicit in burying the truth. The sharpest blow comes when the sketch of the hidden stairwell is dismissed publicly. Officials claim the custodian never worked at the center, that his employment records don't exist. Yet one of the parents remembers him clearly, remembers thanking him after a youth basketball game. The erasure of his existence feels like déjà, or the same erasure that stole their children. If a man who swept the floors can be scrubbed from history, what chance did 12 children ever have? Despite the stonewalling, the evidence has already spread too far. Copies of the Polaroids circulate quietly online. The sketch of the stairwell is passed hand to hand among the families. Though the official line is firm, the cracks in it are visible. Each denial only makes the silence around the missing children roar louder. By the time the investigators regroup, the pattern is clear. Institutions are not just uninterested in the truth, they are invested in its burial. Denial, intimidation, ridicule, the tactics of a system protecting itself, and yet, tucked in file boxes and whispered testimonies, the story continues to resist. For every record erased, another detail resurfaces. For every denial, another question. The counter-narrative does not erase the children, it only sharpens the focus on what was taken and by whom. The sketch of the hidden stairwell becomes an obsession. Faded pencil lines on coffee-stained paper hold more weight than years of official reports, and the families cling to it like a compass. The investigators decide it's no longer enough to pore over documents and photographs. They need to see the building itself. Though condemned and boarded up, the youth center still stands at the edge of town, a husk of brick and warped siding that casts long shadows across the cracked parking lot. The building is a relic, but it breathes with an unease that hasn't faded in 27 years. The air inside smells of mildew and dust, a sharp bite of rust from corroded pipes. The walls are tagged with graffiti, some recent, some decades old. Broken glass crunches underfoot. What was once a place of laughter and summer games now feels hollow, as if the building itself knows what was taken from it. Flashlights sweep across peeling paint and warped ceiling tiles, each step stirring echoes that mimic the footsteps of children. Armed with the sketch, the investigators retrace the custodian's memory. The diagram points toward the east wing, a section that once housed storage closets and utility rooms. Official blueprints show nothing unusual, just blank space where walls should be. Yet when they reach the end of the hallway, their lights catch on something out of place, a seam in the wall where no seam should exist. The drywall patchwork is crude, as if hurriedly applied. Dust clings to it differently than the surrounding walls, and the baseboard ends abruptly, like a stage set hastily assembled. They press on it, and the hollow echo confirms what the sketch suggested. Behind this wall something waits, pulling at the edges. They reveal wood framing that doesn't match the rest of the construction. Someone sealed this entrance deliberately, and not with the kind of precision expected in county-approved renovations. This was done to hide, not to repair. The families who accompanied the investigators stand in silence, their breaths shallow, eyes fixed on the growing crack of space. One father grips his hands together so tightly, his knuckles whiten. The sound of the crowbar splitting plaster fills the room, loud and raw until finally the barrier collapses inward. Dust explodes into the air, choking and acrid, and behind it a door emerges, metal, institutional, painted a dull shade of green. Its surface is scarred with scratches, long and desperate, some gouging deep into the paint. Near the handle, the faint outline of a circle intersected by a line is carved into the steel, the same symbol the custodian remembered. The same symbol seen faintly in a Polaroid. The handle is stiff with rust, but it turns. Hinges groan as the door opens, revealing a stairwell that descends into darkness. The air is colder here, damp with the smell of earth and concrete. The beam of a flashlight catches something on the steps, a single shoe, small enough to belong to a child. Its rubber sole hardened with age. No one speaks. The silence is too heavy, too dangerous to break. They descend slowly, the concrete steps slick with moisture. The walls close in, lined with exposed pipes that drip water in irregular rhythms. At the bottom, the stairwell opens into a narrow corridor. The floor is poured concrete but uneven, as if patched multiple times. The walls are marked with faint chalk smears, long since blurred but still visible under harsh light. One investigator swears he can make out names in the smudges, though they are too faded to confirm. Halfway down the corridor, they find another anomaly. A door bricked over from the inside, mortar newer than the surrounding foundation. Whoever sealed it wanted permanence. Yet even through the bricks, faint scratches are visible, claw marks trailing downward. Someone or something tried to get out. The group lingers there, paralyzed between fear and revelation. For the parents, the hidden stairwell is more than proof. It is betrayal incarnate. The building, they were told, was thoroughly searched, harbored secrets all along. Officials had insisted there was nothing below the foundation. No hidden rooms, no access points. But here, beneath their feet, was evidence of another world, deliberately concealed. The discovery reframes everything. The Polaroids, the witness account, the inconsistencies in the records. This stairwell was the missing axis around which the mystery turned. Standing in the corridor, the investigators realized the case is no longer about what might have happened. It is about what was intentionally buried. The children did not vanish into the night. They were led into the earth, into silence, and into a truth the town was never meant to confront. The flashlights waver, casting elongated shadows that seem to move on their own. No one says it aloud, but each person feels the same question pressing down on them. What waits behind the brick door? And why was it sealed so thoroughly? The underground corridor feels like a throat, swallowing them deeper into something that was never supposed to be reopened. Dust swirls in the cold air, disturbed by each breath and shuffle of their boots. No one speaks above a whisper. The bricked-over doorway looms at the end of the passage, a slab of silence where once there had been access. It radiates finality, the kind that speaks of secrets meant to be suffocated. Yet just before it, along the left wall, the beam of a flashlight catches on a gap in the concrete. At first it looks like a flaw, just a jagged seam where the wall meets the floor. But when one investigator kneels and brushes away dirt, the crack reveals itself as deliberate. A thin slab of plaster has been set over a shallow recess, a cavity no wider than a suitcase. The plaster is brittle now, weakened by years of damp, and with a few strikes it crumbles outward. The hollow breath of the void exhales stale air, and inside, half-collapsed cardboard boxes sag under their own decay. The group crowds close as gloves reach in and pull the first box free. Its cardboard sloughs apart like wet paper, spilling a tide of objects onto the concrete. Notebooks bound in cheap spiral wire, cassette tapes wrapped in paper towels, folders thick with yellowing documents. The smell is overpowering. Mold, ink, something metallic and sour. It feels like opening a time capsule designed not to preserve memory, but to hide it where no light could reach. The notebooks are the first to be examined. Their covers are decorated with childish doodles, hearts, stars, uneven lettering that spells out names. Inside are pages of cramped handwriting, diary-style entries written in the voices of different children. Some are mundane, describing games, snacks, school gossip, but others shift abruptly into fear. We aren't allowed to leave the room at night. The door was locked again. I Think there's someone behind the vent. The handwriting grows shaky on later pages, words trailing off mid-sentence. One entry, dated June 15th, 1997, 2 days after the official. Disappearance reads simply, "They said we're going to be moved. Don't trust the man with the watch." The tapes come next. A small portable recorder is rigged up, and the first cassette clicks into place. The hiss of static fills the corridor before voices emerge, children whispering, giggling nervously, shushing each other. Then a sharp knock echoes in the background, followed by the creak of a door. A man's voice, low and commanding, orders them to be quiet. The tape ends abruptly. Another cassette plays a fragment of a different night, faint singing. Then a sudden burst of crying cut short by footsteps. Each recording is brief, incomplete, like someone captured fragments before being interrupted. The folders are no less haunting. They contain photocopied documents with blacked-out sections, receipts for building materials, and notes scribbled in the margins of official youth center paperwork. One sheet lists the names of the 12 children alongside times, as if tracking a schedule. Beside 2 of the names, the word "moved" is written in red pen. Another folder contains grainy photographs of the building's basement level, clearly taken during construction years earlier, showing the stairwell and corridors in pristine condition. These images prove that the underground space was not an accident. It was designed, planned and known to officials who later swore it never existed. The families hover over these artifacts like mourners at a graveside. Each piece cuts into them anew. Some begin to sob quietly at the sound of their children's voices preserved on tape. Others grow visibly angry, their grief sharpened into fury at the realization that records of their children's suffering were not only kept, but hidden deliberately. It is no longer just a mystery. It is a crime with evidence catalogued and concealed. And yet, even as they sift through the cache, dread lingers. Why was this material hidden here rather than destroyed? Who wanted it buried but preserved? The box feels less like an accident of concealment and more like an archive meant for a future audience. Someone expected it to be found, whether by investigators or by those who orchestrated the events, remains unclear. The underground chamber hums with tension. Flashlights illuminate the bricked doorway again, and for the first time, the group senses that what lies beyond may connect directly to these artifacts. The journals, the tapes, the documents, they are not just fragments of memory. They are breadcrumbs leading deeper, urging the living to follow the path the children once walked. But as they pack the artifacts into evidence bags, the sound of movement stirs above them. Footsteps, faint but deliberate, echo through the hollow shell of the youth center. Dust falls from the ceiling. Someone else knows they are here, and someone may not want them leaving with what they've found. The sound above is unmistakable. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing across the warped floorboards of the youth center, heavier than any creak caused by settling wood. The group freezes, flashlights held motionless, ears straining to separate the natural. Groans of the old building from the purposeful, rhythm of someone moving with intent. Dust sifts down in thin streams, disturbed by the weight overhead. For the families, the noise brings back the old paranoia, the sensation of being watched, manipulated, corralled by forces they could never name. One investigator signals for everyone to switch off their lights. The corridor plunges into blackness, the kind that presses against the skin. Breathing becomes louder in the absence of sight. Above them the footsteps stop, replaced by the faint scrape of something metallic, a chair being dragged, a pipe shifting, or perhaps a tool being set down. Then, a sharper sound, the unmistakable crack of a boot striking against a nailed board, testing weak spots in the structure. Whoever is up there is not lost. They know exactly where they are. The parents exchange terrified glances. One whispers that they should leave immediately, but another shakes his head violently. If they surface now, they could walk straight into whoever waits above. Their only refuge lies behind the bricked door at the end of the corridor. It is madness, maybe even suicide, but the alternative feels worse. They edge toward it, every footstep agonizingly loud on the damp concrete. Someone above shifts their weight, sending another puff of dust trickling down. The sound grows fainter but not gone. Whoever it is has simply moved to another part of the building. A long moment of silence stretches, suffocating in its tension. Then faintly the groan of hinges, doors being opened and closed, one after another, as though the intruder is searching room by room. At the bricked doorway, the investigators run gloved hands over the mortar. It is rough but brittle, weakened by years of dampness. A crowbar bites into the seam, levering against the brick. The sound of cracking mortar echoes down the corridor like gunfire, and everyone flinches, certain it will give them away. But the footsteps above continue their steady patrol. Deliberate, almost methodical. A brick loosens, then another. Behind it, a void yawns black, the smell of stale air rushing out like the breath of a tomb. The parents help claw at the crumbling wall, desperation lending them strength. Fingers bleed against jagged stone. The sound grows frantic, louder than they dare, but retreat is no longer an option. Whoever is above them is circling closer. The vibrations of heavy boots grow sharper, resonating directly through the beams overhead. Finally, with a thunderous crack, enough bricks collapse to reveal a gap wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Dust explodes into the corridor, and for an instant all light is swallowed. The group coughs and stumbles, pushing through the opening one by one. Behind them, the sound above stops dead. Whoever is there has heard. Inside the bricked chamber, flashlights reveal a small windowless room. The walls are concrete, bare except for deep scratches near the floor and faint markings along the ceiling where pipes once ran. In one corner sits a rusted cot, the mattress long decayed, its springs twisted and exposed. Beside it, a metal bucket crusted with rust and sediment. The air is so damp it feels heavy in the lungs, carrying the sour tang of rot. Then the sound comes again, this time not above, but from the stairwell they entered. Footsteps descending, slow and unhurried, as if whoever follows knows they cannot escape. Panic ripples through the group. Some parents clutch the artifact boxes tighter, others press back against the walls, eyes darting to the only exit, deeper into whatever labyrinth lies beyond this chamber. The crowbar strikes the inner wall again, frantic now, chipping away at weak seams. The footsteps grow closer, measured, echoing down the stairwell. Whoever approaches is in no hurry. They want their presence to be felt. A beam of light cuts briefly across the stairwell entrance, sweeping the corridor like a predator's gaze. At last the wall yields, bricks collapsing into rubble that scatters across the concrete floor. A narrow passage reveals itself, dark and unfinished, leading deeper underground. The families pour into it, dragging the evidence boxes with them, flashlights trembling. Behind them, the stairwell creaks under the weight of someone unseen, someone who knows the hidden spaces of this building far better than they do. The chamber is left in ruins, dust swirling, bricks scattered, and the faint echo of footsteps continuing their descent. For the investigators and families, there is no turning back. Whatever waits ahead in the dark is unknown, but behind them the danger is certain. The building has awakened, and they are no longer alone in its hollow belly. The passage beyond the broken wall narrows to the width of a coffin, the ceiling pressing low enough that they must hunch to move forward. Dust and powdered mortar cling to their hair, their clothes, the air itself. Every footstep grinds loose pebbles underfoot, a sound that feels too loud, too revealing. Behind them, silence fills the chamber they abandoned, but none believe it will remain empty for long. Someone is still there, listening, waiting or following at their own pace. The beam of a flashlight sweeps ahead and catches a cluster of markings on the concrete wall. At first they look like random scratches, but closer inspection reveals letters etched with something sharp. Nails, wire, even desperate fingernails. The writing overlaps itself in chaotic layers, words and names crammed into every available space. Some of the marks are shaky, childlike attempts at sentences. "Please tell Mom, we were here." Other lines are dates, scrawled over and over again, 6/30/97, 6/14/97, 6/15/97 time, recorded as if each day spent trapped was another chance that someone might find them. The parents run their fingers over the etchings, their faces pale in the trembling light. One mother presses, her hand flat against the wall where her daughter's name is written, repeating it in a whisper, as if speaking to the stone itself. Another father mutters angrily about why none of this was uncovered in 1997, why no investigator dug far enough to find what the children had left behind. Their grief is sharpened into rage, but beneath both lies a terror that what they are reading is not history but testimony, The corridor continues, twisting slightly, the concrete floor giving way to compacted dirt. The air grows colder, more suffocating, and the smell shifts from dust to something sharper, almost chemical. A beam of light catches another object ahead, a small pile of fabric slumped against the wall. Kneeling, one of the investigators carefully lifts it, revealing fragments of clothing, brightly patterned pajama bottoms, a torn t-shirt with a cartoon logo faded by age, socks stiffened into shape by years of damp. Mixed in with the cloth are rusted bottle caps and broken crayons, the kind of small treasures children carry with them when forced into strange places. The discovery crushes the group's fragile composure. Several parents can't look, turning their faces to the wall as tears carve paths. Through the dust on their cheeks, one of the investigators pulls out evidence bags and begins sealing the items carefully, his hands shaking. The objects are proof that the children were here, alive long enough to leave behind traces of their small lives. But they are also evidence of abandonment, artifacts of suffering that no one was meant to see. Farther down the passage, the light reveals something more chilling. Carved into the dirt floor are deep grooves, almost like claw marks, running parallel for several feet before vanishing into the darkness. The width and depth suggest they were made by human hands dragging against the soil, resisting or reaching for something. The sight stops everyone in their tracks. Whatever happened in this corridor was not orderly or planned. It was desperate, violent, and it left scars in the very earth. The silence breaks with a sound behind them. A faint scrape, then the brittle snap of debris being stepped on. Flashlights whip back toward the chamber, but the entrance is already swallowed by dust and shadow. Nothing moves, yet the group knows they are not alone. The unseen figure is still there, stalking from a distance, letting them descend further. The knowledge presses against their sanity, a psychological weight as heavy as the underground air. They push forward, deeper into the passage, their fear transformed into a grim resolve. Every mark on the wall, every scrap of clothing, every groove in the dirt is a refusal to let the children's existence be erased. But the passage narrows further still, funneling them into a space where retreat will be impossible. The light ahead catches on the outline of a door, wooden, warped with moisture, and sealed with a simple sliding bolt from the outside. The parents stare at it, horrified by what it implies. The door is not an accident of construction. It is confinement, deliberate and cruel. On its surface are more carvings, tiny handprints pressed into the softened wood, faint scratches where fingernails once tried to claw their way through. The bolt is rusted but intact, and as one investigator reaches out to force it open, every parent knows that whatever lies beyond is not only the next layer of this building's secrets, but perhaps the most unbearable truth they have yet uncovered. The sound of breathing, faint but steady, drifts again from the passage behind them. Someone is close now, close enough that the dust seems to stir in rhythm with their presence. No one dares to turn back. The door groans under the investigator's grip, the rusted bolt beginning to give way. In the oppressive silence of the underground, the scrape of metal on wood feels like the tolling of a bell, marking the end of safety and the beginning of revelation. The bolt resists at first, fused with rust and years of moisture, but with each pull it begins to flake away, leaving orange powder streaked across the investigator's gloves. The corridor is silent except for the grinding groan of metal surrendering to force. Every parent holds their breath, as if exhaling might summon the figure they know is behind them, drawing closer step by step. Finally, with a violent jerk, the bolt snaps free and the wooden door creaks open, releasing a gust of stale air so sharp it makes their eyes water. The room beyond is low and rectangular, carved crudely from earth and reinforced with planks. Their flashlights cut through layers of dust, revealing objects scattered across the floor in unnatural stillness. Small blankets, thin and matted with dirt, are arranged in uneven piles as though they once served as bedding. Tin cans lie in a corner, their labels eaten away, their edges jagged with rust. A cracked plastic jug sits empty near the wall. Everything in the room speaks of habitation, but not comfort. Survival under conditions no child should ever endure. Then the walls reveal their most damning truth. Drawings cover the boards and exposed soil. Scrawled in crayon and marker, etched with fingernails when writing tools ran out. Some are simple, stick figures holding hands, smiling faces, sunbursts above crooked houses. But others grow darker, more abstract. Spirals of black crayon filling entire sections, jagged lines crossing out shapes of adults, eyes scratched over with furious strokes. One corner holds a mural of sorts, 12 stick figures drawn side by side, each with a different color shirt. Beside them, a 13th figure looms larger, rendered in uneven black lines. Its face is blank, but one arm stretches toward the children, and over it in shaky block letters are the words, "The Watchman." The parents collapse under the weight of it. One mother drops to her knees, her sobs echoing against the dirt walls as she touches the crude drawing of a girl in a red dress, identical to one her daughter wore in a photo from that summer. Another parent runs trembling fingers over the scratched-out eyes, whispering a name through clenched teeth. The reality is undeniable. The children were kept here, alive long enough to leave behind testimony in art, evidence in scribbles and cries for help no one ever heard. At the far side of the room sits a small wooden crate, its lid half splintered. Inside are more belongings, a deck of playing cards warped with moisture, a small cassette recorder with its buttons jammed, and a handful of Polaroids wrapped in wax paper. They are careful unwrapping them, but the photographs are damaged, faded images of the children inside this very room. In one photo they sit against the wall, some smiling weakly, others staring at the camera with hollow eyes. A hand, adult and gloved, holds the camera out of frame, its shadow stretching across the children like a claim of ownership. The silence in the room thickens. Every discovery shifts the weight of the narrative from tragedy into evidence, from unsolved disappearance into organized captivity. And yet, even as they process it, the parents cannot shake the sensation that they are standing in a tomb. The air feels heavier here, colder. The scratch marks on the wood around the door's inside edge tell. Them, the children, once tried to claw their way out, their final acts of resistance preserved in gouges that make the parents' hands tremble when they trace them. Then it happens again, the faint, deliberate sound of movement behind them. The door they forced open groans on its hinges, and for an instant, the light from the corridor flickers as though something passed in front of it. Flashlights snap back, illuminating nothing but the narrow tunnel, a thin mist of dust suspended in the air. But they all know someone is there, watching, patient. The investigator nearest the door motions for silence. They gather the artifacts quickly, sealing the Polaroids, the recorder, the drawings, into evidence bags. The parents, though shaken and trembling, help with frantic hands. They cannot leave anything behind, not when these fragments are all that remain of their children's voices. The longer they linger, the greater the danger. As they prepare to retreat, one flashlight catches another detail on the far wall, carved deeper than the others, gouged into the wood with desperate force, are words no one expected. If someone finds this, follow the pipes. He can't hide it forever. The sentence halts them, turning fear into an even heavier kind of dread. The sound of breathing, closer now, drifts in again from the corridor. Whoever waits behind them is not trying to stop them from finding this room. They are herding them deeper, pushing them towards something worse. The parents clutch the evidence to their chests, and for a moment, the group teeters between flight and paralysis. The chamber is both sanctuary and trap, a place where their children's truth still echoes, but also a dead end with only one way out, straight back into the darkness where someone waits. The message carved into the wall feels less like advice and more like a command. Follow the pipes. The words hang in the stale air, daring them to obey, and the parents cling to it because it offers direction in a nightmare where every step has been blind. The investigator runs the beam of a flashlight along the ceiling, and sure enough, rusted metal pipes snake across the chamber, disappearing into a crack at the far side where dirt has shifted away from the foundation. The parents exchange glances, their fear mingling with desperate hope. If their children left this instruction, then somewhere beyond the pipes lies an answer. They waste no time. The group squeezes back into the narrow tunnel, flashlights sweeping wildly, hands gripping the evidence bags as though letting go would mean betraying the children a second time. The footsteps behind them have gone quiet again, but the silence feels more threatening than sound. It suggests patience, control, someone who knows these passageways better than they ever could. The crack where the pipes disappear has widened over time, just large enough to crawl through. Dirt crumbles as the first investigator shoves his body into the gap, his flashlight scraping against stone. On the other side, the tunnel opens into an even tighter corridor lined with exposed pipework that drips with condensation. The air is damp, foul with the reek of mildew, but fresher than the sealed rooms they've left behind. As they move forward, the parents begin to notice more signs of habitation. Rusty tin cups sit abandoned along the floor. A torn piece of fabric, once a blanket, hangs from a pipe. Someone has drawn crude arrows in charcoal, pointing the way forward, and beside one arrow is a set of initials. D.A., a mother gasps. It matches her son's. She presses her hand against the mark, sobbing softly as she realizes he must have carved it while alive, leaving behind a trail for someone he believed would one day come. The tunnel grows more treacherous the deeper they go. The pipes leak steadily, leaving slick patches of moss that make footing uncertain. At one point, the group must cross a stretch where water pools ankle deep, the cold soaking through their shoes and chilling their bones. The sound of each splash reverberates through the narrow passage like a warning bell, and with every echo they expect to hear the answering tread of boots behind them. And then faintly they do. The sound comes again, measured, deliberate, closing the distance. Whoever stalks them is in no hurry, content to let fear drive the families deeper into the labyrinth. The parents huddle closer, their flashlights darting nervously. The investigators whisper for calm, but their own voices shake. Every instinct screams that they are being shepherded. Ahead, the pipes curve into a larger chamber, where the ceiling rises high enough for them to stand straight again. Their flashlights reveal what looks like an old utility room, its walls lined with corroded valves and pressure gauges, long since frozen in place. In the center of the room sits another crate, this one sturdier than the last, hand-stenciled with faded letters, property of Municipal Authority Archive. The parents crowd around as one investigator pries the lid open. Inside are more files, but unlike the chaotic scraps from the hidden cache, these are neatly arranged in folders, labeled with typed tags. Dates, case numbers, official seals all pointing to city, departments that had publicly denied involvement with the youth center after the disappearances. It is proof of complicity, evidence that records existed and were buried, literally beneath the foundation. Among the files are blueprints of the building that clearly map the very tunnels they are walking through, their existence omitted from every public record. One father flips through a folder and freezes. Inside is a memo dated June 17, 1997, 2 days after the children were reported missing. It references relocation protocols and bears multiple signatures, some of them names he recognizes from officials who still hold office today. His voice breaks as he reads aloud, all 12 accounted for, transfer scheduled, access sealed upon completion. The words crush what little hope remained that the children simply wandered away. The parents are shattered, torn between grief and rage. Some cling to the evidence with white-knuckled fists, while others collapse against the walls, sobbing into the damp air. For a moment, the chamber feels like a courtroom, the artifacts laid out as exhibits, in a trial that has waited 27 years to begin. But before they can process it fully, the sound comes again, the steady approach of boots echoing down the pipeline corridor they just traversed, louder now, closer. One investigator sweeps his light across the chamber and spots another exit, a narrow service tunnel descending at a steep angle, barely wide enough for one person at a time. It is their only option. He urges the families forward, helping them lower themselves into the darkness below. The parents clutch their bags of evidence as if they were lifelines, the only pieces of their children that still remain. As the last parent lowers herself into the descent, the chamber above fills with light. A flashlight beam not their own cuts through the gloom. The unseen figure has arrived. The parents descend faster, hands slipping on wet stone, hearts pounding. The sound of boots reaches the edge of the chamber, followed by the faint rasp of breathing. Whoever has been following them is finally here. The tunnel drops steeply, leading them deeper into the earth, away from the safety of retreat. Above, the light lingers, searching the chamber they've abandoned. And then suddenly it cuts out. The darkness behind them is total once again. The pursuer doesn't need light. They already know the way. The tunnel drops like the throat of a well. Damp and narrow, its walls slick with condensation. Each parent lowers themselves carefully. Boots scraping against stone, fingers clutching at wet pipes for balance. The further they descend, the colder the air becomes, heavy with the odor of rust and stagnant water. Their flashlights bob wildly, beams jittering across the uneven walls, catching the occasional glimmer of moisture that looks like eyes staring back. Every step downward feels like crossing a threshold. Further away from daylight, further from the world above that might ever believe their story. By the time they reach the bottom, their legs burn with exhaustion. The tunnel spills them into a cavernous space, a sub-basement or cistern, far older than the youth center above. The floor is uneven, half submerged under shallow pools that ripple with each step. Thick iron pipes run overhead, some cracked open, dripping water steadily into the pools below. The sound echoes in the chamber like the ticking of an endless clock. Their flashlights sweep across the far wall, and a collective shiver passes through the group. There are doors, 3 of them heavy steel, sealed with rusted wheels like submarine hatches. Stenciled above each door are faded letters barely visible under decades of grime. Unit A, Unit B, and Unit C. The labels are bureaucratic, but the sight of them in this hidden place sends terror racing through the family's veins. Whatever these units once contained, no one was meant to see them again. The parents hesitate, torn between the primal urge to flee and the unbearable compulsion to know. Their children's drawings had warned them. Their names were carved into the walls, their belongings scattered like breadcrumbs. Could the truth be locked behind one of these sealed doors? Or are these the graves they feared to find? The lead investigator forces himself forward, splashing through the ankle-deep water. His gloved hands grip the wheel of Unit A and twist. At first it resists, unmoving, but with a groan of protest the wheel begins to turn, flakes of rust breaking away and floating on the water. The sound reverberates through the chamber, deafening. The parents flinch, terrified that whoever has been stalking them above will hear. But it is too late. The noise is made, and silence can no longer conceal them. The hatch gives way with a final screech, and the door shudders open. The air that escapes is colder still, tinged with mildew and something faintly metallic. Flashlights pierce the darkness inside, revealing a long, narrow room lined with rows of cots bolted to the walls. Most are bare frames now, their mattresses decayed into dust and fiber, but the arrangement is unmistakable. This was housing, confinement, a makeshift barracks designed to keep human beings underground for weeks or months. On the far wall hangs a chalkboard, its surface stained and pitted. Faint traces of writing remain, phrases barely legible but still visible, quiet after lights out. Obey the watchman, do not leave without permission. The words strike like knives, rules written for children, rules meant to break them into compliance. Scattered across the floor are remnants of life, a cracked toy car, its paint long flaked away, a journal too damp to read, but still faintly showing lines of handwriting, a pile of paper cups with childish doodles drawn in marker. The families kneel among the artifacts, weeping quietly as they recognize the handprints of children who never came home. Then a sound rips through the chamber, a metallic clang, somewhere above, echoing down the shaft they descended. It is followed by a splash, faint but clear, in the shallow water near the tunnel entrance. The parents whip their flashlights upward, beams shaking violently. Nothing is visible, only the ripples spreading across the pool. But the message is clear. Whoever followed them has entered the cistern. Panic spreads like fire. Some parents beg to retreat, to escape before it's too late. But others clutch the evidence bags tighter, whispering that they cannot leave. Not now, not after seeing proof with their own eyes. The investigator urges them to move quickly, suggesting they check the other doors before they are cornered. Against their instincts, the group splashes across to Unit B. This hatch is easier to open, its wheel turning with less resistance. The door groans as it swings wide, and this time the smell is worse, rot mixed with something acrid, chemical. Flashlights sweep the interior and freeze. Inside, the room is nearly empty, except for a single chair bolted to the center of the floor. Straps hang from its arms and legs, frayed but intact. Beside it sits a small metal table littered with syringes, Glass vials and scraps of paper. The vials are unlabeled, their contents long since crystallized. The parents recoil, gagging, but the investigators step closer, photographing every detail. One paper scrap contains a typed heading, Compliance Induction Schedule. Below it, a list of times and initials, each followed by check marks. The initials match those of the 12 missing children. The parents break down completely at this, screams echoing off the wet stone walls, grief boiling over into rage. This was not a disappearance. This was captivity, control, an experiment in obedience carried out under the city's feet. Before they can process the horror, a new sound slices through the chamber, the unmistakable splash of boots in water. Closer this time, advancing steadily toward them. The intruder has arrived. Their light sweeps briefly across the far wall, a beam not from their group, but from another source, cutting the darkness with precision. The parents clutch their evidence, their sobs stifled into panicked breaths. The investigators herd them toward the last hatch, Josna to see, knowing it may be the only place left to go. Behind them, the water ripples violently as the unseen figure advances, step by deliberate step, never rushing. As if certain the families cannot escape the depths, the wheel of the final hatch resists, unmoving at first. The lead investigator throws his weight against it, the parents huddling close, their flashlights trembling. Each second stretches unbearably long. The sound of boots approaching louder, closer, inevitable. Finally the wheel gives, screeching open with a shudder that echoes like a scream. They push the door wide, and the beam of their lights reveals a sight that stops every heart in the chamber. The door to Unit C groans open with a sound that seems to shatter the air. For a moment, no one dares to shine their flashlights fully inside, as if what waits beyond could be worse than anything their imaginations have already conjured. Then the beams cut across the space, and the chamber is revealed. Unlike the previous rooms, Unit C is not arranged with cots or a single chair. It is wider, more cavernous, and its floor is littered with debris, splintered wood, broken furniture, fragments of toys, all half submerged in stagnant water. The walls are painted in broad, uneven swaths of color, reds, blues, yellows that have bled and peeled with time, forming grotesque smears that once might have looked cheerful. It was decorated for children. Someone tried to make this place look like a playroom, but the decorations are grotesque in their decay. A mural of a sun painted in sloppy yellow arcs has dripped down the wall so that it resembles a face melting into the ground. Paper streamers hang from the ceiling, brittle and torn, some dangling into the water, where they sway like rotting vines. Along one wall, a row of lockers stands rusted shut, their doors warped and buckled from moisture. The paint on their surfaces is etched with scratches. More names, more dates, some half-legible, some swallowed by rust. The parents wade in, horrified and transfixed. Their flashlights sweep across the debris and catch on a pile in the corner. At first it looks like collapsed shelving, but as the light steadies, the truth emerges. It is a heap of small belongings stacked deliberately. Shoes all child-sized, some missing laces, backpacks with cartoon characters from the late 90s. Their fabric faded but unmistakable. One bag still has a name tag attached, its ink smeared but readable. A mother drops to her knees in the water, sobbing, clutching the bag to her chest. Beside the pile lies a box of notebooks and binders, waterlogged but intact enough to reveal pages scrawled with writing. Some appear to be attempts at school lessons, arithmetic, spelling practice. Others are darker, lists of rules written in a trembling hand, phrases repeated over and over like punishments. Obey, stay quiet, don't ask to go home. One binder contains longer entries, as though someone had tried to keep a record. The handwriting is messy but older than the rest. It might have belonged to one of the children as they grew, or perhaps to an adult tasked with documenting. One line chills them most. 2 are gone. They said it was necessary. The families break down around these discoveries, grief pouring into the cavern like a flood. Some cradle the shoes and backpacks, as if their children might still feel the warmth of their touch. Others rage, slamming fists into the rusted lockers, cursing the officials and faceless architects of this horror. The investigators work feverishly to photograph, bag and preserve what they can, but their hands tremble, their faces pale. This isn't just evidence. It is a burial ground disguised as a playroom. Then, one of the fathers notices something strange. Near the far wall, a section of paint has peeled away to reveal a hatch set into the concrete, low to the ground and half submerged in water. It's smaller than the others, more like a crawlspace entrance. Scrawled across its surface in thick black crayon are the words, "Not this way. Don't follow." The handwriting is childish but frantic, the letters jagged, gouged over and over, as if to make the warning impossible to miss. Before they can debate, the sound they've dreaded returns, boots splashing into the cistern outside, the measured rhythm of someone entering. Unit A flashlight beams dance against the water beyond the door they left open, sweeping closer. Panic tears through the group. They cannot go back. The only options are forward into the hatch or to stand their ground in a room that feels more like a mausoleum than a refuge. The investigator kneels by the hatch, tugging at its rusted latch. It resists, groaning under his grip. Behind them, the intruder's light grows brighter, cutting into the chamber. The families huddle, clutching the evidence bags, their sobs now strangled into silence. The sound of the latch finally snapping open is deafening, echoing like a gunshot across the water. The hatch swings inward with a scream of metal. Beyond it, the flashlight beams reveal only darkness, a crawlspace descending deeper into the earth, narrower and more suffocating than anything they've yet endured. The warning on the door feels alive, screaming at them through time, "Don't follow." But they have no choice. As the first parent crawls inside, the beam of the intruder's flashlight cuts across the playroom, slicing through the mural of the melting sun, glinting off the pile of shoes. For the first time, a shadowed figure is visible in the light. Tall, deliberate, unmoving at the threshold. The families don't wait to see the face. One by one, they force themselves into the hatch, their bodies scraping against concrete, their fear propelling them into the dark. The last investigator pulls the hatch shut behind them. The echo of boots on water stops just outside. Whoever waits in Unity, C is content to let them crawl into the place the children themselves warned against. Still, they crawl onward. The tunnel stretches on a labyrinth of suffocation. Their knees ache, their arms quiver from the strain, and the sense of being hunted grows unbearable. Several times they pause, certain they hear movement behind them, the faint scrape of something metallic against stone, the whisper of fabric in a place where no one else should be. Every pause confirms it. The intruder has not stayed behind in Unit C. He has followed them into the forbidden tunnel, slower, deliberate, savoring their descent into his domain. At last the crawlspace opens into a final chamber. They spill into it one by one, gasping for air, grateful to stand upright again. The room is circular, carved with more precision than the rest, its ceiling higher, its walls lined with metal shelving units bolted to the concrete. On those shelves lie dozens of boxes, files, and reels of tape sealed in canisters. A table sits in the center, covered with scattered papers, clipboards, and brittle photographs. The family's flashlights converge on the photographs first. Black and white images of the children, seated in rows, staring blankly at the camera. Their expressions are hollow, their postures rigid, as though forced into silence before the shutter clicked. Some photos show them in groups inside the playroom, others standing in front of chalkboards with their names written above. None of the children look alive in spirit. Their eyes are empty, their smiles painted by force. One investigator carefully lifts a file from the table. Its cover is stamped with a seal, an official crest, government or corporate, the ink smeared but still recognizable. Inside are typed reports dated between 1995 and 1997, each documenting progress. The language is clinical, detached. Subject 07 demonstrates improved compliance under stimulus. Incident: tough resistance resulted in corrective action. 2 subjects removed from program. The initials and dates match the timeline of the disappearances. It is undeniable proof that this was sanctioned, recorded, hidden in plain sight. The parents reel at the sight. Their grief burns into fury, the weight of decades of silence crashing down at once. Here, in this underground chamber, is the archive of a crime so vast it demands acknowledgement. But as they frantically gather files and photographs, a sound cuts through the chamber, the steady scrape of boots entering the room. The intruder stands in the arch of the crawl space, silhouetted in their flashlights. His face remains obscured by shadow, but the calm, deliberate way he steps into the chamber chills every soul present. He does not speak. He does not rush. He simply watches as the families clutch at the truth he has guarded for decades. The chamber, once a sanctuary of answers, has become a trap. The chamber holds its breath. The intruder steps forward, the beam of his flashlight slicing across the shelves, the boxes, the families huddled around the table. His boots echo against the concrete, each step measured, deliberate. The families retreat instinctively, clutching the files and photographs like life preservers, though the weight of them feels fragile, almost useless in the face of his silent authority. For a moment, no one moves. The parents' breaths come in ragged gasps. The investigators' hands hover at their belts, where their recorders and cameras dangle. The intruder finally lowers his flashlight, and in the dim glow, the outline of his face is visible, older, lined with time but unmistakably human. He is not a monster from the shadows, not a supernatural figure. He is a man, and in some ways that makes him far more terrifying. He watches them without a word, eyes scanning the files clutched in their hands. Then slowly, he raises one gloved finger to his lips, a universal command for silence. The gesture freezes the room. Rage flares in some of the parents, grief driving them toward defiance. One mother steps forward, holding a file high like a torch. Her voice trembles but does not break as she shouts that they are taking this evidence out, that the world will finally know what was done. The intruder does not rush to stop her. Instead, he lets the silence stretch, lets their defiance echo against the wet concrete walls. Then, almost casually, he tilts his flashlight toward the shelves, illuminating a sealed metal drum tucked in the corner. The drum bears the same official seal as the files. Its lid is dented but intact, and across its surface someone has scrawled in thick marker, "Burn on recovery." The implication is sickening. This chamber, this archive, was never meant to be discovered. It was meant to be erased. The investigators scramble, snapping photographs of the drum, the shelves, the files. The parents cry out that this is proof, undeniable proof, and that if they make it out alive, nothing can bury this again. But as they argue, the intruder finally speaks. His voice is hoarse, low, but steady. "You won't leave the same way you came." Panic surges. Some parents rush for the crawl space, only to find it blocked. At some point, unseen, the hatch they entered has been sealed from the other side. The way back is gone. They are trapped underground with the man who has guarded these secrets for decades. Yet something shifts. One investigator, calmer than the rest, notices the intruder hasn't drawn a weapon. His flashlight is steady, but his hands are empty. The man isn't here to kill them, not immediately. He is here to deliver a choice, or perhaps a warning. His words, though sparse, drip with menace. "Some truths live longer than you do." The stalemate stretches until, from somewhere above, the world intervenes. A sound filters down through the concrete, the muffled but distinct roar of voices, sirens, the chaos of a crowd gathering at the youth center. The investigators realize that in their panic and grief, in their frantic work, they triggered alarms or sensors buried in the tunnels. Whatever this underground system was, it is not as forgotten as they believed. The intruder turns his head, listening. For the first time, uncertainty flickers across his face. He takes a step back toward the shadows of the chamber, his presence retreating rather than attacking. His flashlight beam sweeps across them one last time, and then he disappears into a side passage, his boots fading into the distance. The families are left shaking, clutching evidence, their rage tempered by a new fear that he let them live not out of mercy, but because his work is unfinished. When they finally emerge hours later, led up through a rusted maintenance shaft the investigators force open, the night air hits them like salvation. The youth center above is surrounded by police tape and press vans. The discovery of the underground vault cannot be hidden. Photographs and files are passed into trembling hands of officials, cameras flash, and the story begins to bleed into the public sphere. For the first time in 27 years, the families' voices are heard. But as they give statements, exhausted and broken, a quiet dread gnaws at them. They know the truth is out but not complete. They know the intruder still walks free in the tunnels. They know the files they carried were only fragments of what lay buried in that chamber. And when one investigator opens a final notebook pulled hastily from the shelves, The last page holds only a single line scrawled in desperate handwriting. Not here. Look to Marrow Creek. The camera lingers on that name, underlined twice, as the families huddle together in grief and relief, unaware that the door they pried open tonight leads into something far wider, far darker and far from finished. The screen fades, leaving silence, and the faint echo of boots splashing through water, somewhere deep below.